It is the age, little kids like that, they want to see, I get it. But, you know, if you have any other.
Well, you know, I don't know if it's self, but we might be,
Did you miss that? Can you start?
Righto, good afternoon everyone. I am mindful it is now thereabouts 25 to 3. We've got 40 minutes with me and there's still one more presentation to go. My name's Matt. Obviously, you've been learning with me all the way through. Today is session 2 of introducing you to working safely in the construction industry. Now, I am mindful there's a few people in the room that weren't here for the session last week, so we'll bring you up to speed early on. We'll go over today's lesson, and there's a little bit of an activity that we'll do in small groups, or maybe in groups of 2 or 3 towards the back end of the session. So we shall move quickly along. Housekeeping, obviously, you know, make sure your ergonomics are good, you're good, comfortable, electronics or your drinks, keep lids on them or keep them in your lap or move away from your desk. Make sure that you can see the slides, and if you can't hear me at all through the presentation, put your hand up and I'll speak a little bit louder, and we'll go from there. In case there is an emergency, we'll be exiting through this door. Out the doors to the left, and we'll be meeting at the muster point. Over near the table tennis, we call it table tennis tables outside it. There is the emergency muster point. Is everyone familiar with where that point is?
Yes. Yes, sir.
All right, no problem at all. So only if you hear the buzzer. Please, if you do, if you are told to evacuate, please leave your belongings there. I'm sure they'll be all right. No. The first thing we want to do is preserve your life, so we'll make sure that we move you out. All right. Make a start. So obviously, again, this is the same slide that we've seen last week. I'm Matt. I've been in the construction industry for the best part of 20 years, mainly working in water utilities as through infrastructure. I've worked all over Australia, and I've worked in New Zealand as well on various stages of jobs. And I've gone from being a junior worker on the tools to being a supervisor, a foreman, field operations manager. And now my current role is I'm a technical training manager, so I have technical experts who go around the country and train my workers. So, why this is heavily loaded about safety today and hazards and risks, these photos represent of why I have the behaviours that I do when it comes to going to work and working safely. So, obviously, yep, that's what I look like in the corporate world. That's my headshot there. So if you see my LinkedIn page or whatever it might be, that's the shot you'll generally see. Now, I don't usually wear sunglasses to work. You're supposed to be wearing safety glasses, so that wasn't actually on a job site, but obviously you've got hard hat, brim, glasses. But all of this, if I don't do any of this and have good attitude when I go to work, I can't do this. And these are the most important people in my world. So that's my family, that's my immediate family. And of course, these are my good friends. So without being able to do the things that I do at work, and I encourage the message of, you know, work well, work safe, work together. If I don't have those attitudes, and I'm very cavalier about it, it means I don't get to spend time with my family, and I don't get to do the things I like in life. Okay. So, remember what we went through last week. So let's go back and have a little bit of a recap for those that weren't here, so you have a bit of an understanding of what today's all about. The whole idea and the aim of this session was, of course, to get you guys to have a bit of an understanding and some knowledge should you wish to do a white card training course and work in the construction industry. So today's session and last week's session is about you having a little bit of an understanding, so when you go into a course as a learner, not knowing anything about it, you've got a little bit of an idea of what to expect when you go to do the assessment and the test and the training yourselves. So, first and foremost, work in the construction industry, you need one of them. That's a white card. It's nationally recognised. You cannot get a job on a construction site across anywhere in Australia without one of them. If you manage to do so, I'd strongly consider who you're working for, because they probably don't have a very good safe system already. We went through what working safely actually means. Now in Victoria, we work under a little bit of a different safety system to the rest of the country. there's the OH&S Act, and we've got OH&S regulations. Now, the definition from these two documents is to work safely means to secure the health and safety and welfare of employees and other people at work, and eliminating at the source all risks to health, safety, and welfare of employees and other people, and to ensure employees' business activities do not place members of the public at risk. And these are what the two documents look like. The role of you and your employer at work we covered off as well. Definitions of roles and responsibilities, employer versus employee. Safety is everyone's responsibility. Now, for those who were here last week, does anyone remember some of the key things we talked about? What an employer is responsible for and an employee is responsible for? Remember?
Employer brings the safety equipment, so things like the hats and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. So we're talking about PPE. We're talking about the employee's responsibilities to make sure they've got a safety system, making sure that people are trained and confident in what they do. We're talking about making sure that the plant equipment is all good, it's checked, it's been verified as okay to use. The big thing these days is we're checking on their welfare as well. What about an employee? What's your obligation?
As an employee, you have to collaborate with your employer to ensure safety needs are met.
Yep.
So if you see something wrong, you've got to speak up about it, not just complain about it to your peers. Actually tell management, hey, we've got to fix this.
Yes, spot on. Yeah, work together. Your actions or inactions have an impact on the safety at work. Okay. And another thing to consider is when you're an employee is if you're being asked to do something that's a reasonable instruction, make sure you follow through with it. If you've got concerns about safety, at the same token, bring them up. Employees have an obligation to be able to collaboratively work with their employees, make sure it's a safe and harmonious workplace. So, while we went through a lot of slides and there was a lot of detail on one of them, if you remember correctly, the end message is safety is everyone's responsibility, and we all have a role to play. We talked about what harms us and how often. Up the top there on the top image there is some of the hazards that you might find in not only the construction industry, but a general workplace. You've got unrestrained falls, manual handling, objects falling onto people, trip hazards, falling from heights, and obviously being hit by plant equipment. And we talked about workplace deaths in Australia through 2020, which was who unfortunately have been killed, what kind of industries they were in, and what the leading cause of their deaths were. So for the industry that we're talking about today, which is construction, we rank number 3. And it's not a you don't want to be ranking anywhere near the top, but unfortunately we do so. So there's still some work to do. Agriculture and forestry. So farming, this was obviously you weren't here last week, Matt, so to give you a little bit of an impetus into that. Particularly, you'll hear on the news quite a lot. Farmers with four-wheeler rollovers, tractor rollovers, they've been engulfed and suffocated in silos and wheat silos and so forth like that, because generally they're family-run businesses or they're self-performed businesses that don't have a safe system of work. And the big thing is a lot of the deaths attributed to the workforce here are from people that are well experienced and know best. So they're generally in the range between 50 and 65, coming to the end of their life. I've been doing this for years. And what we talked about as part of the onboarding program in a lot of businesses these days, generally we pair up junior people with these people in these age groups. They're the ones that generally take the risks. So it's very, very important that we change our psyche and our behaviours around safety. All right. We talked about what site signage means and how to dress to protect yourselves. Now, last week, again, I'll just touch back on last week. Colours. Does anyone know what red means?
Don't go there.
Stop.
Danger. That's right. Don't go there. Stop. Generally, that's the highlight. Stop signs. Don't go through this intersection. Speed limits. Red circle. Don't go faster than this. Danger. And we had some examples of some slides and some signs last week, and we brought some signs in. The message was there, it was danger. What does green mean? Safe, that's right. Follow this sign and we'll get you to safety. So you'll find first aid boxes, green, here to help. Exit signs like the one at the doorway here for the fire escape, go through here, I'll get you to safety. Muster points, again, they'll be generally white and green background. I'll read here, it is safe here. What about blue? Do I remember what blue means?
Caution. For designation.
Instruction.
For, close.
Safety.
Instruction for what you need to enter the website.
That's spot on. This is stuff that you need to know for a specific site. You need to have these type of things or be aware of these things. So for each individual job site, you work along the street and I'll dig up all your road that might stretch hundreds of kilometres. There might be different stages of work. There could be waterworks going on, gas works going on, electrical works going on, or roller works or whatever it is. So they could be very different hazards. So outside their sites or compounds, we probably find these signs, and some of them at times might be a little bit different. So before you think about entering a compound, assuming that you're accredited to do so, pay attention to what you need to be wearing when you're going in. The lingo, the jargon, the language you'll see in here. And we've talked about acronyms, I think, in Will's session a little bit earlier today. We talked about what some of the stuff is that you'll hear and see on a construction site, what they mean. SOP, Standing Operating Procedure. JSA, Job Safety Analysis. A HIDRA, Hazard Identification and Risk Analysis. Remember that one because that's what we're kind of going to be working on a little bit later on today. An FAO, First Aid Officer, etc., etc., etc. And you know, see Ice Cube there, he's looking a little bit confused because it's a lot of jargon, and if you're not familiar with it, it's going to be confusing. Don't understand it, keep listening and keep practicing. Then there were some assessments. Now, a lot of you would have seen on the Teams page during the week, there were 2 assessments we did last week. One of them was to do a practical assessment, where I got you to dress up as you're going to get prepared to go onto a construction site. So there's just a bit of a snapshot of some of the participants last week. And from the 10 questions that I asked of you, these were your scores. So I was actually pretty impressed last week about what you actually had retained through the session. So thank you very much for putting in the effort in. All right. Our session today, we're going to talk about the basic principles of risk management in a construction environment. Measures for controlling hazards. And then we're going to do an assessment task. And we'll work in small groups, maybe 2 or 3. And we'll identify some hazards that are either in the room, out the hallway, or if you want to go outside, depending on how much time we've got left, then we'll come back in and have a discussion about those. So have a think about the risk of implementing controls, and there'll be a bit of a I suppose, a little bit of a role play, I suppose, when you're doing this. And then I've just got a bit of a community awareness message at the end, just to help you out after this session. All right, any questions so far? Any issues from our, you're okay, Matt? Because I know you're a session behind, you're okay?
Yeah.
All right, no problem at all. All right, first of all, I'm just going to start with a couple of photos of construction through the ages. If you have a look, this centre photo here, and the top one up to the right, is probably something more in line than we can see on an Australian worksite today. You'll see guys working over an edge. They're using tools. They've got hard hats. They've got harnesses on. They've got tethers so they can't fall over. They've got tool bags to make sure the tools can't fall out. Also today, in some other countries, and I'm pretty sure this image was taken out of India or Pakistan, is that you'll see some guys there doing some rendering on a block of flats by the look of it, standing on a couple of planks of wood, no fall protection, no hard hats, no PPE, just in their normal Sunday afternoon footy club, off to go watch a game in their jeans and their shirt, handling chemicals, not knowing what's going on. Then we look at, I suppose, in the early 1900s, building skyscrapers. It's amazing, isn't it? And you see some of these photos, like these people on these sites would have had it hard.
The bottom left one is anxiety inducing.
That's like that.
That's exactly right. That is probably smoke.
That's hectic.
And safety wasn't a concern back then. You know, it was just hard work. I have to provide for my family. I've just got to do what I need to do. And even until recently, you know, in the last 20 years, there are a lot of companies that actually factored in and built in, you know, budgetary requirements that they're going to lose somebody. It's inevitable. My first job, I worked at Leighton in the industry. I worked at Leighton's contractors, putting PTV cables up on the poles for what was Optus Vision, the very first incarnation of PTV in this country. Leighton's contractors, it was a national contract, and it had to be done by a certain point, and that's it. There was no more after that. They allowed for 3 deaths a year because we're working near high voltage electricity. Now, as an 18-year-old going into that job, you're thinking, shit, am I going to die today? They put you through the training, but even still, it was worked on as an exception. So, just a bit of a refresher, because we did talk about it last week, and it's the impetus of our session today. What is a hazard, risk, and risk control? Hazard means a situation or thing that has the potential to harm a person. Hazards can be physical or psychological. These include noisy equipment, moving a forklift, chemical exposure to chemicals, working at heights, repetitive jobs like you're on the tools all day doing haircuts, Jimmy, bullying and violence at the workplace as well. Risk is the possibility that harm, death, or injury or illness might occur when exposed to these hazards. And a risk control means to take action to eliminate the health and safety risks so far as reasonably practicable. And if that's not possible, minimising the risk so far as that's not possible, minimising the risk so far as reasonably practical. Eliminating a hazard will also eliminate any risks associated with that hazard. Reasonably practical is a term that's used a lot with this sort of stuff. So if I was going to dig a hole tomorrow, just outside here, and it was only like that deep, less than a metre deep, then I wouldn't be going out and buying all the shielding and all the fencing and temporary barriers to go around everywhere, because it would cost more than a job. So what other measures that'll be just as effective, or can I implement to make sure that I'm still a viable business? Everyone understand that? Yep. Great work. So, the basic principles of risk management. This diagram here is straight out of the Code of Practice for Safe Work Australia. Step 1, identify your hazards. We all have an obligation before we start work to make sure that we're having a good look around us, become familiar with our surroundings, and have a look at things that might harm us or others. Assess the risk. Understand the level of harm, how serious the harm could be, and the likelihood of an incident occurring. Okay, no problem at all. I'm going to be digging a hole over here. I know I've got a gas main over there. Is it a hazard? Yeah, it is. Is it likely that it's going to kill someone if I'm digging over here? No, it's not. So, but I might want to put, okay, well, I'm not going to bring all my machinery across near that gas line. I'll bring it around another way. Be a way of controlling the risk, for example. As I said, controlling the risk, implement the most effective control measure that is reasonably practical in the circumstances. And all this is cyclical. And it's most important, review the control measures, ensure they are working as planned. Nothing ever goes to plan when you're working outside. Things change. Pedestrian movement changes. Weather. Which way the wind blows can have an effect on what you're actually doing. The wind actually blowing could be a major factor in what you're doing. Traffic, schools, kids, community, and even other subcontractors or other jobs that are working on the area might impact on yours. So continually review the controls. Don't assume that you've always got it right the first time around. Consult, collaborate, and communicate with all involved. Doesn't matter if you're the executive of the company, right down to the person that's sweeping the floor on a summer afternoon when no one's there. Everyone involved needs to understand and work together and understand what they're doing. Measures for controlling hazards. Now, I'll come across this quote, and we all know who Benjamin Franklin is, yeah? One of the founding fathers of America, one of the great inventors and philanthropists that we all know. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And in last week's session, we talked about death and injury rates. We touched on injury rates a little bit, but lifetime injuries. Now, they could have been prevented by having good hazard assessment, good controls, good communication. So just taking that little bit of time to invest, I really just want to get home, it's getting on a bit, I'll just do this quickly. Taking a step back and thinking, okay, I'll just, I'll go get some more signs out the truck, or I'll go get another mate to give me a hand lifting that heavy box or whatever it is. A couple of minutes could save you thousands and thousands of dollars. Not only that, but your reputation as well as a good employer and a good worker. Anyone seen a hierarchy of control before? Anyone familiar with this? No, it's first. You've seen it in
Different context, but yeah.
different contexts, but sort of the same. It's a potable system of of eliminating risk. So basically, the way that this works, everyone, is you've got your least effective at the bottom, your most effective controls at the top. So the most effective thing to do, if you've got a hazard that's come up in front of you, what should you try to do? Eliminate the hazard, physically remove it, take it away. It doesn't exist, don't want to be there, not going to be there. And that could mean simply not a person doing the job. It could be, is there a robotic or a machine that can do the job so I don't have to, or I don't have to put people in that situation. Substitution. Can we do something else to get the same outcome? Do we have to do it this way? Challenging out what we can and what we can't do. Engineering controls. Isolate people from the hazard. In my world, engineering controls would be, I work in deep sewer at times. There's copious amounts of flow. Will carry away. You slip in it, you're gone straight out the wherever. Never be seen it. So what we have is called penstocks and gates. So that'll be penstocks that come down, flow goes away. We have a weir board where you flow behind it, but the area that you're working is dry. So I can safely walk and traverse the line and make sure that I'm safe. Now, once we start going into these areas here, the amber, the orange, and the red, these are starting to become, if you're relying solely on these themselves, then you're going to likely strike trouble at some point. Administrative controls. And they could be like simple things like permit to work. Okay, I can dig here. Doesn't tell you how to do it, but it just means, okay, I've said Joe Smith is okay to dig here because I've checked the dial before he digs, and it doesn't appear to be anything there on the plan. Below the ground is very, very different, but just having a permit to do it doesn't necessarily make it safe on its own. PPE, last line of defence. If you're sending somebody in there, oh, well, it is what it is, that's what we've got to do, let's just get the job done and hope for the best, chances are they're not going to be coming home, or they'll be coming home a different person. So make sure, if you think that you're going to go there and just put on a mask and put on a suit or put on a hard hat, that it's going to be that's going to protect you forever, then you're on borrowed time. And it's a behaviour you need to challenge, and you need to challenge the behaviour of others to make sure that it's effective. So start working your way back up. What else can I do? Okay, yeah, okay, that's still risky. What else can I do again? Try to work. In the first instance, before you even go out to work, try and work from the top down, but if you're there and things change, work amongst yourselves, work amongst your supervisors, work amongst your engineers, try and work back your way out. Anyone have any questions about hierarchy of control so far and the kind of the way to apply it? Every one of you works in a different industry and you have a similar sort of thing in your workplace. You'd have it in kitchens, you'd have it in the corporate environment yourself. Yourself, Ange, would you have anything? It could be a system or a process or a program.
Yeah, you know, just we have the hazards, you know, spills, if something happens, there's always, you know, how to clean up stuff and computer hazards, all that kind of, but more different. It's very different. Like I was thinking, for example, with, you know, obviously PPE became a big word in the last couple of years with COVID. I'm thinking what about if that's your option, right? What else? Because to think about for them to physically remove the hazard is
that's exactly right.
In industry, right?
Great example,
yeah.
And I'll work through that with you because we're one of the industries that were able to keep working. So we worked consistently through COVID. So what we actually did, and with what our clients did, which were major water authorities, okay, because there was a stigma. Excuse me. There was a stigma and a perception of COVID's bad. People don't go anywhere, don't touch anyone. First of all, was okay. We've got a works package, we've got a busted network, it's not going to get any better, we can't leave it. So what do? Okay, let's look at the work package that we've got. We don't want people going into people's homes in their backyards. We'll substitute it out. We'll work on our street networks. We'll look at that. Engineering controls. Okay, where we don't need as many people on site, let's use something else to make sure our working groups are reduced. Administrative controls. QR codes, sign-in, check-ins. We knew where all of our people were any one point of the day, where they've been, who they've been interacting with. So if there was, and there were confirmed cases, okay, the government were going to go tracking back for us. We had to do the tracking. Okay, we need to get these people tested straight away. If we said, all right, just put a mask on and go to work and go your best, all of our workforce would have been out and probably affected with COVID. I was able to sustain. It did affect us. There was there were consequences of that, but we were able to push on. All right. Going on here. My apologies, the clicker has stopped working. All right, what I'm going to do now is there's a small video presentation I'd like you to just listen to. And it's applicable to probably all your industries and all what you do. So it's just a couple of minutes.
As an employer, you must protect your workers and other people from harm. Look for things that could cause injury or illness and decide if you're taking reasonable steps to prevent them. This is called assessing risk, and it's straightforward for most small businesses. It's just one part of how you can manage risk to keep people safe and healthy at work. Look around your workplace for things that could cause harm. These are called hazards. Ask yourself, how are people using equipment? Are they working in disorganized or unsafe ways? Is your workplace in a suitable condition? For example, are walkways always clear? Your accident book and sickness records might help identify less obvious hazards. Think about hazards to health like repeated or heavy lifting, using chemicals, and causes of work-related stress. Pay attention to potentially vulnerable people like pregnant workers, young people, or those with disabilities. Remember other people who might be harmed, like contractors or visitors. Speak to your workers, as they may see potential hazards and have good ideas to help reduce the risks. Once you know the hazards in your workplace, decide who might be harmed and how, and what you're doing to protect them. It's then much easier to decide what further actions to take and who should carry them out. Sometimes you might not be able to remove a hazard completely, so think about how you can make it less likely to cause harm. For example, you could do the job another way, use different materials or tools, or provide personal protective equipment. If you employ 5 or more people, you must record the hazards, who might be harmed, and what you're doing to control the risks. You can use our risk assessment template and examples to help you. Review what you're doing to control risk whenever there are significant changes, like new staff or equipment. You should also review your controls if your workers spot a problem or after any accidents or near misses. Update your records with any changes you make. Protecting people is about what you do to control risks, not the forms you fill in.
All right. How did everyone feel about that?
Pretty common sense.
As an employer,
It is pretty common sense, but you'd be surprised how not common sense is. And if you rely on common sense, you think that people should know these things, then you set yourself up for a failure. Just because you wouldn't do it doesn't mean somebody else thinks like you.
You probably get a lot of, like I get, your industry construction where it's safe, like, it's ingrained in you, but you probably get a lot of stuff in the offices where we just, there's times where you walk past cord or, there's a printer or, you just don't really think about all that stuff in the corporate world. Well, you should, yes, I will now. But, picking up, when I go change the water calendar, in the water. Yeah, I do it myself, right?
Yep.
Because, I don't need any help.
No, and
But
you
it's
know what,
heavy.
not to. But
But it's also heavy and I probably don't do it properly, so.
yeah, manual handling training is
Yeah.
probably a good thing to do in corporate environments, because a lot of people don't. They think I sit at the desk all day. And like even now, I drive a computer most days. I don't drive any machinery on site anymore, but it's important that you're aware of that.
Got something stuck in a shredder once that was a long top that I was wearing because I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. Oh, I touched on it in last week's session too. Like I know of somebody in an office environment. One of the worst injuries I've actually seen in a workplace actually happened to one of the receptionists at work who was carrying a box up the flight of stairs, and she broke her leg very, very badly, and was off work for 18 months. It did a lot of rehabilitation. So it's the hazards that you don't think about are the ones that generally pop up to bite you. Okay, now I am mindful of the time, and to be fair to Andrew in his session next, I am going to, we'll go through the assessment task in a moment. Now up here, I've passed around the room today a bit of a sheet. Now I am sorry that it is A4 and it is small. I do have a digital copy if you would like. But basically this is an example of a hazard risk and analysis control plan. And basically this is what you would do when you're going out to a site. Now this is a template, there are a multitude of different ones that you'll find out there. Essentially, the key things are the company that actually is owning the document, the representative that is filling out the document. So it could be any one of you in any type of role. You could be a supervisor or a career lead for work. You might be working autonomously, so it's still up to you to be able to do that inspection. Some different types of hazards. These are hypothetical here, but obviously there's chemical hazards, physical hazards, biological hazards, psychological hazards, ergonomic hazards, data inspection. And across the top here, I'll just fill out a bit of an example to give you a bit of an understanding here. So yesterday's date, chemical hazards. Ventilation fan not working in the storeroom.
Yes.
It's chlorine based, so it could make an odor and fumes. On top of that, it actually could be explosive. Where's the location of it? Cleaner storeroom. Person at risk, cleaners and store persons. The risk level's high. Now, the up here is a key, I suppose, to actually what levels actually mean. So critical. Risk level, unacceptable risk, likely death or serious injury. Probability, certain. So if I said to you, James, righto, I need you to go get the tennis ball at the bottom of that acid bath there, no worries. And you go, not a problem. I'll be going, well, that's a risk. It's probably unacceptable, and chances are you're going to be cool.
Probably kick it over and grab it, Tom's.
There you go.
So, Matty, are you doing this as in you identified a risk, in this case that the fan wasn't working, or are you saying that in the store the fan may not work?
No, as in, this is what I found. So this is something I've actually identified and seen when I've been walking around or preparing to do a job.
Yep.
This is what I've actually seen. So it's a hazard analysis. Yep. So
And who would do this? Like an actual, anyone?
anybody,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
generally the person that will run a site will do it,
Yeah, okay.
but it will be a collective thing. But as I was saying before, it could be if you're working autonomously, and you're working a particular piece of equipment or plant, then you do one yourself. This is away from a plant checklist. This is about physically in your physical workspace. Things I need to be aware of and communicate. So in this instance, I'll put down high risk, very high risk of harm to people or things. Likely if someone entered in there and the fan wasn't working and there was a room full with chlorine stays in there. Probability, medium. Potential risk to personal things if uncontrolled. If I keep leaving it there, it's highly probable that something will go wrong.
Actually, a pretty good example of something that happened recently like this. Place I knew had a broken fridge, and the manager on duty thought it was a good idea to keep it cool with dry ice.
Right.
You can imagine how that went down. That room filled up with carbon dioxide overnight. Anybody who opened it the next day couldn't breathe. So they had to shut down the business and leave it all open and let it air out.
Wow.
Because that was death trap.
Yeah.
Literal death trap.
After the session, I'll share a story about dry ice, but that's it's not a work-related one, but I'll share one with you with an ambulance who's called about that warehouse part. Anyway, so the existing control measure, well, that's the extraction fan. The person responsible is the warehouse manager. Necessary action to reduce the risk straight away. Danger side, no longer authorised entry to be erected. Remove chemicals to a safe and ventilated area and arrange for fan repair. Date of the action is completed, same day. Anything that's high and critical must be actioned straight away. There must be some sort of plan and dealt with critically. It was completed by J. Smith. Now the residual risk rating is low. Acceptable risk to personal things. We've done something about it. We removed the chemicals. We've got ventilation there. People can enter in. We know the fan's still got to be worked on, but there's nothing in there that's going to cause an odor or them to be overcome by fumes. Control the review plan date, next day. That means you're going back in there just to make sure that your controls are effective. Status compliant. So that's how a hazard control template will work. I'm going to amend the task because I was going to get the split into groups and go outside and have a look for a few things and all that. But what we'll do, we'll work together today. So what we'll do is we'll identify 3 real hazards and risks. Just inside the classroom, we'll try and find 3, and then we'll put some risk ratings, some probabilities, and we'll work through those and we'll discuss those. Okay? How's that sound?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, no problem at all. All right. Who wants to be the first to get up? Have a look around.
Look, there's one.
Yeah. Get up, have a look around. Have a look for real ones. Actually, I'd like you, as the room is, I'd like you to try and have a look about some real hazards. Now, you can't harm a harm.
This chair, look at this. Missing a wheel.
Ah, good one, Jimmy.
That's
All right.
You step on that.
So, Jimmy, if we go
You're
back,
gonna fall off and you're gonna break your arm.
all right. Hold on to that one. Maybe have a look at your electricals.
Well, what about all the cords just everywhere? Like, they should be,
Is that gonna harm? How's it gonna harm you?
This one.
well, if they're uncontrolled, right? So I could accidentally fall out or do something wrong with it.
What's the test take that on? Just out of curiosity.
This one's pretty cool too.
They were pretty old. I looked at this before. 2019, so they're all out of date.
They're all out of date. So we've got an electric cable that hasn't been checked in over 2 years that we're using every day. Yep.
This hasn't been done since 2018.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was the last time.
How did you know that?
That tags this as something to buy.
It was pretty. Since
Smoke alarm,
2018,
there's
is
a
that
chance
probably-
that it's got no batteries or something. Got to make sure it stays on, otherwise there could be
Whatever.
an instance where it just wouldn't go off and you wouldn't even notice.
It could be a hazard. It could be a hazard, but we'll assume that's okay because it does flash. It is flash.
Potential hazard is what I was.
So so far we've got the electrical cable, we've got the chair. Anything else? What about housekeeping? What am I seeing everywhere at the moment?
Drinks and food and stuff everywhere.
Clear access and egress. Chairs everywhere. Chairs facing the wrong direction. Can't get out the window. All right, we've got plenty of them. Okay, let's focus on one of them now before we wrap up to move on. Okay, let's look at the one with the chair with the wheel.
Yeah.
Right. Or missing wheel rather. So what's the problem with it?
Missing the wheel.
That's right. The hazard is, all right, we've picked up that it's missing the wheel.
Someone could be sitting on it and try and move without noticing and fall over because it wouldn't catch.
What's the likelihood of someone on a rolling chair that's missing the wheel? What's the likelihood of them actually probably hurting themselves? I'd say it's pretty high. I would say it's high. Very high risk of harm. So, the probability of it happening.
It's pretty high because it's just sitting here without any warning. So if it had a hazard tape on it, there'd be no risk, right? But
Or
like we just came across it, we've been here all day and no one's looked at it. So
That's
anyone could
exactly
have
right.
said
Anyone could have sat on it themselves. That's right.
It's a structural thing, like it needs a wheel for balance.
Needs a wheel with balance.
Yeah.
Right.
It needs a wheel.
Good. Good. All right. So who's responsible? So the existing control measure is chair's got a broke. The chair is broken. Who's the person responsible for sorting it out right at this point in time? Pretend I'm the maintenance person.
You're the maintenance.
Yeah, pretend I'm the maintenance contractor for Swinburne University. Okay, so it's going to lie with me. So what's the necessary action? What do I do to reduce this hazard if someone hurt themselves right now?
Put it to the person.
Remove the chair.
Remove it.
Remove the chair from the room, lock it out, tag it out, the sticker on it, do not use, take it out of the classroom. Fix me, please. Well, I'll tell you why I don't like that in a minute.
Okay, yeah.
Because there's no description. All it says is there's no ownership on it, and haven't really actually told what the problem is. Sorry, not to pick on you, but
No,
it's
no,
it's
no,
very
Like, do
important.
not sit, missing wheel.
Yes, you
Yes, do not use, danger, do not use. Okay, great job. So now that we've taken it away from the room, we've taken it out of circulation, out of pool, what's the risk rating now? Low. It's an acceptable risk to persons and things. All right? Very good. That is your assessment today. I was going to give you do it in a couple of groups, but we'll push for time. All right. Any questions about today's session or the first session? Any comments from around the room? And I won't leave that there for the next person tomorrow, rest assured.
What are some examples of psychological hazard?
Okay, no ventilation. If you're working in, would have been back in the days of Kodak film, you're working in dark rooms, so prolonged exposure to those type of things. Working in prolonged periods, working in confined space below the ground, mine workers and so forth like that. Bullying and harassment, behaviours at work, intimidation. Giving a worker, I suppose, unrealistic targets and so forth.
What about like say nursing staff during COVID where they just had to work more and more hours?
Yeah, it is a risk. That's where you need to consult with your staff and your wellbeing coordinators and so forth like that. Well, how are we going to manage this? We can't just shut the hospital doors and go, well, sorry, we're feeling a little bit under pressure here and some of our staff aren't coping. That's not an option. So what do we do then? We make shorter shifts and higher rotations so they're not on their feet as long. Do we get them to work through different wards of the hospital so they're not working in triage all the time? So if a person was working in triage all the time, can they be filtered out into other areas? Those type of things. Any other questions? Or we're talking about hazards, risks, controls, and so forth. Yes,
I thought it was really good, but you cover it all around your inspectors' roles and the health and safety reps. Did I miss that?
we talked about that last week. Yep.
Yeah, so you cover that.
Remember, this is preparing them for the white card training, which goes for a day. So we've got about just over an hour to touch on a few things.
You cover that.
Yeah. So roles and responsibilities of who's doing what. Yep.
Don't be afraid to use real life examples as well. You know, you talked about statistics. That's sort of confronting.
Yep.
And again, I actually teach this at this uni.
Yeah.
I talk about the James Hardy asbestos.
Yep.
You know, real life confronting. This is what happens when you don't get stuff happening.
Oh, absolutely.
And also there's that Ballarat trench disaster, which we don't.
I was a contractor for I was a site contractor for that. We actually work for Central Highlands Water with PipeCon.
On the court, it shows what happens at the water scenario when you don't get it right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know your time constraint, but
Yeah.
you know, things like that, I think it really wakes people up.
We
And
did talk about that last week too.
don't forget about the manslaughter.
Yes, that was also covered in week one. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was good.
So today was more about them actually going out and doing some hazard risk analysis themselves, and most of the other stuff was
And
covered
I even
last week.
find just by putting on maintenance, well, who is the maintenance? Got to nominate someone because someone's got to. I get try and find the maintenance around this place.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
If you can close it down to a person.
Yep.
A person working in the maintenance, then your safety sheet's got really good accountability on it.
No, that's all right. I appreciate the feedback.
Because maintenance, they're going to say, oh, well, it wasn't me, it was.
Yeah, it could be Rob, Joe, John, Bill, Bob. Yep,
Guess
100%,
what?
100% right.
We've got things here that are 3 years later, someone's going to say, oh, I thought something.
All right. Andrew's got to go up in a second. Just one last thing I'll go through. If you have a phone, I highly recommend that you use this app. This is called the Emergency Plus app. So if you're out about on the road, you have a car accident or something like that, what this app will do is once you actually download the app from the Play Store or your Apple equivalent, I'm not exactly sure what it is. John will probably be familiar with this app. If you need to contact emergency services, just press the button and it'll actually tell you. You don't have to think about it, where your location is, and your latitude and longitude. So if you're out in the bush somewhere and you're not exactly sure where you are, there's no street sign, you know where it is. When an emergency situation happens, we tend to panic and not think straight away. So all the information's there. Then on the inside here as well, there's a few different things that can help you, some other phone numbers and so forth. This one's actually good. CPR. If you haven't actually done level 1 CPR course before, it's a skill I highly recommend. And I'm not a safety officer by any stretch of the imagination, but I have to do it every 12 months for my job. It's a great skill to have because you never know when you'll need to use it. All right. That's all I've got today. Thank you very, very much. And I'll pass it over to Andrew now.
What happened to dry ice?
Oh, dry ice, yeah. Mate had a party years and years ago and thought it'd be funny to put dry ice in the toilets in the house. And everyone that went to do number 1s and number 2s at the party was starting to get overcome by fumes. And let's just say there was a rather amorous couple that went to a toilet. And after a prolonged session of passion, I'll say, both started